Hello, today we're talking about this book, I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman. This book was originally written in French. Jacqueline Harpman was actually born in Belgium. She started writing somewhere in the early 1950s. This particular book was published in 1995. That surprised me because by reading this book, it's really hard to pinpoint when exactly this was written. I feel like it's really has this timeless essence to it. One that I read was translated from French by Ross Schwartz. You really cannot tell that you're reading a translation. It didn't take me out of the reading experience. Before I share my thoughts, I do want to give you a little overview on what happens in this book. It starts off with 40 women who are kept in captivity. They find themselves in a bunker, and in this bunker they don't have any privacy. They're all just in one big gray space. They are policed, or rather guarded, by 6 guards, and they take shifts, so it's 3 at a time. These guards bring them food, and once in a while they give them some amenity like cloth and some other things. They don't get much more. They don't have any sort of entertainment, nothing. They're just kept in captivity, and they have been here for decades, to the point where some of these women don't even remember clearly the time when they were brought here. All we know as readers is that nothing really eventful happened for them to be here, so there is no recollection of an apocalypse or war or any pandemic or anything like that. It just happened that all of these women found themselves here, and it feels like they initially put up a lot of resistance. They really wanted to understand why they were there. Is anyone else out there? Are there other prisons like the one that they're in? And what else is happening? Why are they there? Who's put them there? And what do those people want from them? So they have a lot of questions, at least initially, but with the passage of time, these guards don't interact with them at all, apart from using their whips to tell them what they can and cannot do. So they don't speak with them, so they never really get any answers to their questions, and slowly they just give up and they just live in this bunker, and that's how time goes by. The interesting part is 39 of the 40 women in this bunker have good recollection of at least having a life before they ended up here. So they were maybe in their mid-20s, 30s, and they had husbands, children, some of them, and they had recollection of a whole life before they ended up here. But one of them, she was a very young girl when she ended up here, and initially they thought maybe she came with her mother or maybe a family member, but there was no one there who knew her. It seems like this little girl ended up in this place with 39 strangers all on her own. And because she was so young, not only does she not remember anything about her previous life, she doesn't even remember her mother. So these other 39 women, despite being in so much distress and confusion and everything else, they do try in some capacity to be a mother to her. These women are not allowed to touch each other. They're not allowed to really interact in ways that are extreme, so it's really hard for them to discipline her or teach her anything, because as you can imagine, children at that age, when they're so young, can be very shy, can be very intimidated easily. But she basically grew up not knowing anything about the world outside of this bunker, and life inside this bunker is incredibly different from life outside, because there is one toilet, or there's a toilet in the middle. There's no privacy. There's mattresses there, but beyond that, there's no furniture. They give them cloth, but no needle and thread, so they use their hair to sew their clothes, and it's basically just rags on them. Also, there is no set rules of how they should be living in this bunker. Nothing was ever said, but through the whips they slowly start to understand that there are a list of things that are just prohibited, they cannot do. They were just given 10 different ingredients on repeat to cook and eat, and because these women have been here for such a long time and mostly given up on everything, the only little entertainment they had was trying to think about, oh, what are we going to be given today and what could we cook from it. And there's only so many variations, but that little part of the day when they could cook something, it did bring a little bit of hope to them. There is a little bit of, I guess, choice that they have on what they can eat or what they can cook to eat with the few things that they're given. If this premise is not already really intriguing, what makes it even more interesting is that she chooses to tell the story from the point of view of the little girl, who has not only lived her whole life in captivity, but doesn't know anything of the outside world. And I feel like that part is what was the most fascinating to me. As children, we have very few rules that we live by, that we ascribe to ourselves. But I think as we grow up, there's so much that we learn about the world and how to navigate ourselves. It really made me think that if we didn't know anything about the world and about how to live, how would we live? And I think the author explores that question through this narrator in such an interesting way. There are so many questions that she has about the outside world. And not only has the main character not experienced the world at large, all her experiences have been around women, and everything she knows about the world is through the women that she's grown up with. The only men that she's ever encountered are the guards. So there are 6 guards in total, and one of them is slightly younger than the others, and she takes notice of this. She can kind of tell like age, because she's seen that the women in the bunker have like aged in a certain way, and then she can tell like, okay, these are the signs that makes a person older than the rest, because otherwise there is no clock in there, there's no way to tell one day from the other or even 1 hour from the other. So there's no set passage of time, and she sees the passage of time in the women. But more than that, she becomes like a clock in this bunker, because imagine you are all women who are like between 25 to 45 years of age, and you're all growing all together. That is not as obvious to see as seeing a young child who might have been like a couple of years old suddenly growing up so rapidly, because children grow so fast. And watching her grow was almost like a visual clock for the women to see and realize that they were getting older in this bunker, and time was passing without them having any control over it. When she was really, really young, she didn't quite understand why she was there. She had some anger and resentment, but as she grew older, she became painfully aware of how different she was from the rest of them. And she talks about this one thing that she feels like separates her from them the most, which is she didn't have her periods, and she didn't know what romantic love is. And these, I feel like, are very strong parts of girlhood and growing up, and things that she feels like she must be something entirely different from these other women because she hasn't experienced these. And when she wants to know about these things, she feels like these women are holding on to these secrets because it makes them better than her, because they've experienced things that she hasn't. Whereas for the women, they might not want to talk about it because either it brings up memories of a painful past or loss, or just not wanting her to go through the loss of something that she won't fully comprehend. The more curious she feels, the more she feels like there are things that they're keeping from her, the more distant she becomes. But I think like once she grows older and she starts to actually pay attention to the type of conversations these women are having, and she tries to focus on what they're doing, she starts to get this realization that we're all stuck here, and them knowing these answers is nothing special. Like nobody's going anywhere. There's no point to any of this knowledge, and it's not going to help anyone. So that secret sort of loses its power over her over time. But something else she notices is that there is a form of hierarchy between them. So the older ones are more respected, they teach her how to treat and listen to the elders, things like that. And she finds these things a little bit weird because she thinks that they're all there and nobody's really contributing or doing anything differently to the others. So why should she just have to listen to certain people just because they're older than her? And you can tell just because she's not really experienced these in the outside world, it seems fairly bizarre to her in here. But then it also made me think about how truly they are all on the same boat. There is no sense of superiority when you're all held captive in a bunker together and you don't even have a sense of privacy even when using the bathroom. But still they form these hierarchies. And I thought it was really interesting because the same thing happens in the modern prison system. Like you'll see hierarchies and you see like power play and stuff like that, even though technically everyone's powerless in there, but still they try to establish some form of dominance. And I think her not knowing this point of a power play or dominance and all of that, she just completely disregards it and decides that this is not something that is going to bother her or something that she's going to live by at all. And I think that was really, really interesting to read, because it's not something that she chooses to do because she wants to act rebellious. Rather, it made no sense to her in the first place. And I think we get this notion that even though she has so little knowledge of the world, she's incredibly curious, and she never once fails to question why. She has no sense of like, sure, that is how it is and that's it. She has no sense of hopelessness, of despair, of courage, even of other things. She has no understanding of these concepts, so these concepts don't make much sense to her, and she just goes by pure instinct on what feels right and wrong to her. And I think this is what is such an interesting character study, to follow her through the course of her life, and read about like someone's inner monologue when they have so little inhibitions on how to live their life. The part of the book that I enjoyed the most is when she starts talking about using her imagination to keep herself occupied and entertained. So in the time where she feels like she's so different from other people and they're keeping secrets from her, she starts to just spend a lot of time on her own, and she starts conjuring up these images of herself being in a relationship with the younger guard, and how, you know, one day he lets her out, and slowly she'll keep building on this imagination. And she almost like describes it like your imagination goes so wild that you experience this like a psychological orgasm. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, like an intellectual orgasm. I don't know. She just goes on building this world in her head, and it becomes more and more vivid. And she starts imagining things, I guess, based on things that she's heard or based on just her own imagination. And she also tries to do a little bit of a power play with this younger guard, because she just sits there and stares at him, because there's nothing else like he can do about her staring at him, but she can do that. So she just sits and does that till she can make him look towards her or notice her, and this becomes her little act of rebelliousness. But the other women take notice of this, and obviously they try to understand what's happening, like why is she being isolated, why is she isolating herself, and what's going on in her head, because they see changes in her. And at this point she says basically, you know, you guys were perfectly happy to keep things from her. Now I have my own secret that I don't want to share, and has her own power over these women. And they feel incredibly hurt by this, which I think was like very true portrayal, because sometimes, like, especially when it's like generational, you know, older people think they can have like all sorts of secrets and things that they can hide from younger people, but they expect younger people to share absolutely everything with them without giving that mutual respect back. I feel like if you treat some people like they're not worthy of certain explanations, then you cannot expect them to be as open and honest with you either. And I know there are some conversations that are just not age appropriate, but I think at least in some way we can make younger people feel a little bit more confident and comfortable with the questions that they have, rather than just kind of keep them hanging or shun them and be like, these are not things that you should think about, because they're already thinking about it. And here she is finally understanding things and making sense of it herself. And when she does that, they're like, oh, how can you build your own rules here? Like, it doesn't work that way. But she makes it work. How does she make it work? I will read it out to you. So she has like a full outburst. By the way, I'm only on page 15 and so much has already happened. So she says, "You're a fool," I retorted, intoxicated by my newfound certainties. "And this conversation is absurd. You think you have power, but you're just like the rest of us, reduced to receiving your share of food from the enemy hands, and with no means of punishing me if I rebel against you. Seeing as they forbid any authority other than theirs, you can neither beat me or make me go without. Why should I obey you?" And this really takes the women back, because they realize that she's now forming her own values and morals, and they cannot just tell her how to live her life. But more than that, I think it makes them question their own choice to live by certain rules and what those rules really meant anymore. Because up until the point that no one questions something, we don't question it too. But the moment people start questioning something, it makes us think about things that we usually don't give the time of day to. And I think that can really change our perspective on things that we believed in our entire life. Like, one question gets into your head and you can suddenly start spiraling. And I think that's sort of what happens with the rest of the women. The other women very quickly begin to realize that despite having lived in the bunker her whole life, she is very capable of forming her own ideas and morals and values about the world, and very much having her own belief system that no matter how hard they try, they cannot just impose theirs on hers. And I think this is such a strong message to give out, that even if we grow up in places where there's a very singular way to think and live, there are people who still manage to break out of that and live and refuse to commit to those like ways of being, and they do their own thing, and they do that really beautifully, and it's fully possible. And I think I really love that message here. As time passes, she does befriend this one woman who seems a lot younger than the others, still quite a lot older compared to the protagonist, the unnamed protagonist. The woman's name is Athena, and Athena seems to be a lot more gentle towards her than the rest of the women. So it takes a long time, but slowly she starts warming up to Athena and sharing more with her. But even though Athena starts telling her more and more about what she knows and the other women know, it very quickly dawns on her that they actually don't know much at all, and especially about why they're there, and it doesn't bring her any new revelations than what she already knew, and she's just not happy about it. So she tells Athena to tell her about things that she doesn't quite understand, and Athena shares her thoughts about the passage of time in the day. So how previously they used to have 24 hours in a day, and how that would kind of repeat, and how they would have particular schedules, and how there's no way to know if they still have that same system, if they still follow a 24-hour clock, because in the bunker when there's light they wake up, when it goes dark they have to go to sleep. So there's no way of really knowing. So the protagonist, she decides that since she's been a clock for them, telling them about the passage of time over years, now she's literally going to become the human clock for them inside this place, and she's going to try to calculate time, the passage of time, through her heartbeats. So she's going to feel her heartbeat, count them, and over time she gets so good at this that she begins to accurately count thousands and thousands of heartbeats to be able to like literally tell you how many days have gone by, which is crazy. I don't know how she manages that. With that, they come to the realization that they're not actually following a normal clock. So some days are shorter, some days are longer, and it's all like up to whatever the guards or whoever deciding. And I think this really shows how they've taken away every single thing that makes people human. By taking all of these things away, they've really reduced them to a point where they don't even feel human in there, because what are we without understanding day and night and age and time and all of these things? It's very hard to make sense of our own like existence. And I feel like had it not been all these women supporting each other, they would have not made it so far without going insane. This little thing that she discovers, the passage of time and all of that, the hours in the day, it brings a little bit of hope to the women, because this is a bit of a new information that no one else had, and there hasn't been anything new to know for a really, really long time. Just as they were getting hopeful, and as they were planning to figure out other things, one day as one of the guards was bringing them food, as he put his key in and was trying to open it to give them the food, the alarm goes off, and he drops everything and he just rushes out. For a second the women are confused. They're like, are they going to come back? What's happening? But when nothing happens for a while, the little girl, she opens the door, like the cage door, and slowly starts walking out. She seems to be the most fearless, again bringing back to the idea that she doesn't know much about fear. She has more curiosity than fear at this point. So she steps out, and slowly the women follow her. They come upstairs and realize that they're in this little like cabin situation. So they were underground, but above ground there's like a little cabin, and they find just a massive stockpile of ration and other things that they were usually given to stay alive, and very few belongings of the guards, but the guards were gone. And as they step out of the cabin, they realize how tiny the cabin is, and it's just basically everything is underground, and there is no sign of life anywhere around them. It's just fields of grass, and as far as you can see, like there is just fields. and they thought, like, this is crazy, like, where are we? But they are so happy to be outside, at the same time scared because they don't know if the guards are going to come back. So they kind of stick by the area for a while. They gather some supplies and they slowly start moving, and they want to find some form of life, but they can't. And the more they walk, they're getting a bit lost. Soon they discover like a river, so they settle down next to it. They refuse to go back down to the bunker even if there is no sign of life outside. They find the river, they settle down there, they make a little like separate area for their bathroom, and they are basically enjoying being outside under a sky and experiencing things like swimming and this and that. And obviously the protagonist, she's so taken by everything, and it's really incredible to read her first experiences of all these things. But soon they realize that the ration from where they were staying would run out, so they decide to move, and they decide to find other people and just understand what's happening, where some form of civilization. I'm not going to go too much into depth between this and the ending, because I feel like this is the part where if you haven't read the book, it's going to be a beautiful read. But eventually they go on and on and on, and they don't find any signs of life. What they keep finding is more and more bunkers where people were not as lucky to have, the alarm didn't go off when the food was being delivered, so they were just locked in and the guards ran away, so they died in those bunkers. And some of the bunkers had men, some of them had women. Some tried to die with dignity, others died trying to escape. Not that there's no dignity in that, but that's how this is described in the book. And I think it's just really heartbreaking, because this part of the book is just constantly like hope and desperation and like hopelessness and despair, and there's just continuously, you feel so many emotions for these women, because this place that they found themselves, not only do they have to walk so much to find another cabin, but in the time that's passing in the outside world, there's no seasons, there's no changing seasons, and there's no other form of life, no animals, nothing. So the more time they spend there, the more they're like, are we on Earth? Because it doesn't feel like we're on Earth anymore. And there's no sign of the guards, there's no sign of absolutely anything. As time goes by, the women get older and they slowly start passing away, till it's only the little girl who's alive. And they had to settle down in between because some of the women couldn't walk anymore. So once everybody leaves her, she decides that she's going to continue looking for whatever it is. She's going to continue her journey, and she does. And at some point she finds a bus full of skeletons of guards, but nothing much comes out of it. But much later in her life, as she's exploring on her own from one cabin to another, she finds a little bunker. And this is a different type of bunker. So there's a little hatch, she opens it, she goes down, and there's like a room, like a proper room, filled with a bed, all these books from the outside world, and a lot of food, a lot of supplies to last her for the rest of her life. Almost at this point, it felt to me like Truman Show, like somebody saw that she was the only one and that she was still persisting, so they quickly built this so that she could go and like die peacefully, because I don't know, not that they feel bad for her, but like, I don't know, like a human experiment. And there, as she teaches herself to read and write, she then decides to write her own story. And she says, I don't know if anyone's going to read this, I'll probably be dead by then, but I hope that whatever you read here, you will carry with you for the rest of your life. It made me then go back to the whole book and think about how this little girl, and now an older lady, was just a combination of all the women that were in there. And I think this is the part of the book that I found just so powerful, because I've read some reviews that describe this part as like haunting and scary and just dreadful, because the thought of being alone in a world with no one else is so scary. But I think for her, because she's firstly never known what civilization is, secondly felt always incredibly alone and different from everyone that she was surrounded by. And because she had never learned to fear things, she just didn't live in fear. I want to read the part of the book that made me feel that way. This is page 182. There is always light. Sometimes I hope that one night it will go out, that something will happen. There is always light. And by light, she means that there was always electricity wherever she went, like in the bunkers, in her own bunker, in this little bunker here, but outside, like there's no sign of where all of this electricity is coming from, right? So that's what she's referring to. So yeah, this is page 182. There is always light. Sometimes I hope that one night it will go out, that something will happen. The women were always wondering where it came from. I never really understood their explanations of power stations, pylons, conductor wires, and I have never seen anything corresponding to their hazy descriptions. I have seen only the plane, the cabins, and the shelter where I am ending my days. I have long since stopped trying to imagine things I do not know. I have spent a lot of time studying the objects on the shelves in the corridor, but I have learned nothing. They are perhaps weapons or a means of communication that would have enabled me to contact humanity. Too bad. I gave up reading and rereading the books. So few things happened during all those years of walking. I found the bus, I lost the road, I arrived here. In any case, I had to die someday. Even if I led a normal life like these women before, I would still have found myself at the dawn of my last day. Sometimes the women pitied me, saying that at least they'd known real life, and I was very jealous of them. But they died, and I'm about to die. And what does having lived mean once you are no longer alive? If I hadn't fallen ill, I think I'd have set off again all the same and would still be walking because I have never had anything else to do. The book really made me think about how much we hold ourselves back in our lifetime because of the things we learn from the experiences of others. You know, these are not even things that we've experienced ourselves, and yet we teach ourselves to be cautious and also prepare ourselves for situations we haven't even encountered based on experiences of others. We are taught to fear so much and trust so little, especially nowadays. And some people just throw all of that out the window and they live their life as they want. Some turn out to be billionaires from that. Some turn out to be in prison. Some, don't really make it past that point because they put themselves in really dangerous situations. There is no right or wrong answer because all of our experiences of life are going to be so different. So the best we can do is not live in the fear of the unknown. There is also so much about being a girl, being a woman, and being surrounded by other women in this book. I think a lot of the reviews and other discussions of this book that I saw online talked a lot about how this book discussed womanhood, and I do think that all of those themes are definitely present and very beautifully captured. But I think beyond that, it's also a very beautiful exploration of the human mind and how strong we can be as people if we are not taught to fear everything in life. So yeah, that was my little discussion on this book, I Who Have Never Known Men. It's a fairly short book, so I definitely recommend this if you are intrigued by what I talked about today. I left a lot of stuff out, even though I talked about most of the premise. I think there's so much more that you can absorb from this book, and I plan to actually reread it because I think something like this has so many layers that each time you reread it, you're going to come away with just more food for thought and just so much incredible stuff. So that's all for today. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.